Now that we have set up our web server to serve the web page to prompt user to enter the Wi-Fi key, the next thing to do is to set up our fake access point. In order to create a fake access point that is able to broadcast its SSID to the Wi-Fi network for people to connect, we need to use a software called host APD. Host APD is able to create an access point with any SSID which you specify. So in this case, assuming that we are trying to attack this access point called IoT Lab, your host APD will then create a fixed access point with the same SSID, also called IoT Lab. And then, having a fixed access point itself is not enough. Whenever a user or anyone connects to the access point, it needs to have an IP address so that it can communicate over the internet. So in order to provide the client or any user who connects with an IP address, you need to have a DHCP server. And that is where we can use a program called DNS mask. DNS mask is able to act as a DHCP server. DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. So it allows any client to have an IP address which is dynamically created and assigned for the user who connects. So after the user connects and gets an IP address from the DNS mask, the DNS mask will also assign a DNS server to the user so that the user will be able to query DNS names using the IP address of the DNS server. So the DNS server also is run by DNS mask. So after the user has got an IP address, the user will now be able to communicate to the internet back to the DNS server to request for any URL. Next step. So if the user were to request for any URL, the DNS mask using its DNS server will redirect the user to our own web server. And our own web server will now return the web page to prompt the user to enter the Wi-Fi key. So no matter what URL the user requests, the DNS server that is run by DNS mask will always redirect it to our own web server. So that is why this web server or this website is called a captive portal. So from here onwards, any URL that is requested, the web server will return the captive portal. So that is how the system works. So in order to proceed, we need to install host APD and DNS mask, and we will do that in the next lesson. See you then.